Welcome back, everyone. As always, it is a blessing to be here. Today, something happened that has not happened all week, and I want to be careful about it because on Wednesday, I told you the opposite. XRP is up almost 7% while Bitcoin is flat. There is a headline going around saying XRP has completed a double golden cross against Bitcoin. I pulled the actual moving averages this morning, and I'm going to show you exactly what crossed and what did not. And then I'm going to show you the one word that appeared in today's coverage that nobody is putting in a thumbnail. And we start with XPR Network because XPR is doing something today that is genuinely informative. XPR is at about 0.3 of a cent and it is down 2.5% on the day. Now hold that next to XRP, which is up almost 7% in the same session. On Wednesday, I pointed out that XPR was lagging the rally, and I said that ordering was evidence the move was liquidity rather than anything XRP specific. Today, XPR is not just lagging, it is going the other direction entirely. And that gap between the biggest name on my screen running and the smallest one falling is the single most useful thing on the board today. Because it tells you the money arriving is not spreading out across the sector, it is going into one asset. The board first, and the board has moved a long way in 4 days. Total crypto market cap is $2.62 trillion. Fear and greed is at 71, which is greed. Bitcoin dominance is 59.3%, and the altcoin season index is at 29.5. And I want you to notice one thing on that board that did not move. On Wednesday, Bitcoin dominance was 59.3%. Today, after XRP has run 48%, Bitcoin dominance is 59.3%. Identical. The altcoin season index went from 29.4 to 29.5, also identical in any meaningful sense. If this were an altcoin rotation, if money were genuinely leaving Bitcoin and spreading into the rest of the sector, those two numbers would be moving. They are not moving at all, which tells you XRP is doing this more or less alone. On Tuesday, when I sat here and recorded a video with XRP at exactly $1, that fear and greed number read 41 and it said fear. It is now 71 and it says greed. That is 30 points in 4 days, and I want you to file that away because sentiment moving that fast in that direction is itself a piece of information, and it is not the comforting piece. Now XRP, and here is the number. XRP is at $1.48, up 6.7% on the day. On Tuesday, it was at exactly $1. Wednesday, it closed around $1.19. Thursday, it ran to $1.41. Today, it is at $1.48. That is a 48% move in 4 sessions, and I want to be honest with you about my own read because I got part of this wrong. On Wednesday, I told you the 18% move was not an XRP story. I said it was the Clarity Act and a short squeeze that the whole market moved together, and that the ordering proved it because the large caps ran hardest and the small caps got dragged along behind. That was a fair reading of Wednesday's data. It is not a fair reading of today's. Today, Bitcoin is down 0.1%. Ethereum is up 0.25%. XRP is up almost 7. That is not the market carrying XRP. That is XRP leaving without it. Something changed between Wednesday and Saturday, and if I sat here and pretended my Wednesday call covered it, I would be doing exactly what I spend these videos criticizing. And I want to say something about that because it is the whole reason I make these the way I do. I gave you a specific claim on Wednesday with numbers attached, which meant it was capable of being checked. 4 days later, part of it did not hold. That is what a real read looks like. If I only ever told you things that could not be measured, I could never be wrong, and I would also never be useful to you. Which brings me to the headline everybody is sharing today. XRP completes double golden cross against Bitcoin after 27% rally. Now, a golden cross is a real technical event with a specific definition. It is when the 50-day moving average crosses above the 200-day moving average. Traders watch it because it is a slow signal. 200 days of price history do not turn around quickly, so when the 50 finally gets above the 200, it is saying something durable has changed. That is why the term carries weight. So I pulled the price history this morning and calculated it myself on the XRP to Bitcoin ratio, which is what that headline is actually about. And I want to lead with this because it matters more than anything else I say today. The cross is real. I verified it independently. On the 3-hour chart, the 50 period average crossed above the 200 period average about 12 hours ago, and on the 2-hour chart, it crossed about 36 hours ago. 2 time frames, which is where the word double comes from. That article is accurate, and I am not here to tell you otherwise. What I want to give you is the piece that a headline has no room for, which is the scale of it. When somebody says golden cross with no other qualifier, they mean the 50-day and the 200-day on the daily chart. That signal carries weight for one specific reason, which is that 200 days of price history is slow. It does not turn around in a week, so when it finally flips, something genuinely durable has changed underneath it. A 200 period average on a 3-hour chart is not 200 days. It is about 25 days of price. On the 2-hour chart, it is about 17 days. So the cross that happened is a real momentum signal describing roughly the last 3 or 4 weeks. It is not describing the last 7 months, and the words being used to sell it come from the signal that does. Because on the daily chart, here is where things actually stand. The 200-day average sits at $1.28. The 50-day sits at $1.09. The 50 is 14.4% below the 200, and in the 261 daily closes I pulled, those two lines do not cross once. Against Bitcoin, the daily 50 is 9% below the daily 200, and there is no crossover in the window either. And there is one more thing I found that I have not seen anybody mention. I ran the same calculation on the 4-hour chart, which is only one step up from the 3-hour that produced the headline. On the 4-hour, the 50 has not crossed the 200 at all. It is still underneath. So the signal exists on the 1-hour, the 2-hour, and the 3-hour, and it disappears the moment you zoom out by a single step. That is worth knowing, because a signal that only survives at short time frames is telling you about the last few weeks, which is exactly what a violent 4-day rally would produce. And here's a number that puts the whole thing in proportion. XRP spot today is about 16% above its own 200-day moving average. The price has run hard and fast, and the long averages simply have not had time to follow. That is what a sharp move looks like early. It is not yet what a trend change looks like, and the honest way to hold this is that it might become one, and it has not become one yet, which takes me to the word I promised you at the start, and it comes from today's coverage, not from me. Benzinga published a piece today with the headline, XRP price gets extremely overbought as whales buy and ETF inflows jump. Extremely overbought. That is in the same news cycle about the same asset on the same day as the Golden Cross headline and the How High Can XRP Go headline. Both of those things are true at once. Whales are buying, ETF inflows are up, and the asset is extremely overbought after a 48% run in 4 sessions. Overbought does not mean it stops. Assets stay overbought for a long time in strong moves. But it is a real reading. It was published today by a real outlet, and it is not in a single thumbnail I have seen because it does not sell. There is also a price analysis circulating today with the headline, Major Breakout Confirmed, How High Can XRP Go? And I want to say something about price targets generally because you are going to see a lot of them this week. A price target is a guess wearing a suit. The $2 number in some of today's coverage is not arrived at by any method you could check. It is a round number above the current price. When somebody gives you a target, ask them what would have to be true for it to be reached, and ask them what number would prove them wrong. If they cannot answer the second question, the first answer was decoration. What I can give you instead is what is measurable. The 200-day average is at 128 and the price is above it. The 50-day is at $1.09 and it has to travel a long way to cross. Those are not predictions, they are levels, and you can watch them yourself without trusting me or anybody else. And let me be practical about that overbought reading, because the word gets thrown around and misused in both directions. Overbought does not mean the price is about to fall. Assets and genuine trends stay overbought for weeks, and people who sell the first overbought print in a real movie give up an enormous amount. What it does mean is that the move has become stretched relative to its own recent range, which practically means two things. The size of the daily swings goes up in both directions, and the risk of entering right here is higher than it was at $1 because you are buying after a 48% run rather than before it. That is not a reason to do anything in particular. It is a reason to size a decision differently than you would have sized it on Tuesday. The other story circulating today is that Goldman Sachs has reclaimed the top XRP position. That is a real filing and it is worth knowing. But I would ask you to hold it exactly the way we held the Morgan Stanley filing on Tuesday. A disclosed position is a disclosure. It tells you an institution owns some. It does not tell you the size relative to everything else that institution owns, and that ratio is usually the entire story. When the actual numbers are published, I will bring them to you. One line on Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is not the story today, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. Bitcoin is at $77,262, essentially flat, down 0.1%. It broke 70,000 on Wednesday and 78,000 yesterday, and today it is resting. That is all the airtime it needs, and the fact that it is flat is precisely what makes XRP 7% interesting. Stellar is at just under 20 cents, up 2.7%. Hedera is at 7.8 cents, up 0.6%. And there is the ordering, and it could not be clearer. XRP up 6.7, Stellar up 2.7, Hedera up 0.6, Bitcoin down 0.1, XPR Network down 2.5. On Wednesday, every one of those names was green, and the biggest ones ran hardest, and I told you that was a market-wide move. Today, one name is running, and the rest are flat or falling. That is a completely different picture, and it is the picture you get when money is being directed at a specific asset rather than at the sector. So let me pull it together because there are 4 things on the table, and all 4 are true at once. So what am I actually watching now? The 50-day moving average, it sits at $1.09, and it is 14% under the 200-day at 128. If this move is a real trend change rather than a fast squeeze, that gap closes over the coming weeks, and eventually those 2 lines actually cross. That is a slow signal, and it cannot be faked by a single week. If instead the price fades back toward the averages, then what we lived through this week was a violent repricing on a regulatory catalyst, which is a real thing that made real money for people, but it is not the same as a trend. I do not know which one it is yet, and anybody telling you today that they do is selling you something. As always, none of this is financial advice, and nothing here is a price prediction. Every figure I have shown you is a live number with a source. And the moving averages in this video I calculated myself from 261 daily closes. So you can pull the same data and check every one of them. Please do. If this was useful, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you catch these breakdowns as they come.